Don't miss the inaugural All-American Cup Team Tennis Tournament, presented by Thomas J. Henry, at the Freeman Coliseum in San Antonio, Texas, November 11 through 13. The All-American Cup features 10 top men's U.S. players competing on 2 teams, East versus West, each captained by the greatest tennis doubles team of all time, Mike and Bob Bryan. You don't want to miss this. Brother versus brother, East versus West, best versus best. Tickets on sale now at allamericantenniscup.com.
On this, a Tuesday, it's March 7th, 2023, and on Tuesday in the offseason, we celebrate Math Tuesday.
Math Tuesday. Math Tuesday.
It's Math Tuesday here on Texas Football Today, where we dive into the numbers of football across the Lone Star State. And last week, we had a little fun talking about home field advantage, and we broke it down in a variety of different ways. And one of the things that I found to be particularly interesting was whenever we broke it down by whenever games were close.
Yeah.
Because when games were close, that is when really you saw, I think, a more pronounced home field advantage.
Yes, correct.
That in a close game, home field advantage can maybe put your team over the top. And so I wanted to kind of expand on that, and I wanted to take a look at the at teams in close games, because that is, to me, I think that you've obviously got some teams out there that go out there and they just blow every team away.
Yeah.
Right? They just dominate every team that they play, or they are sadly non-competitive and they get blown out in almost all of their games. There's a lot of teams. There's a fair number of teams out there that do not play a whole lot of close games. For example, I'll give you I'll just tell you that. Let me see if I can find this real quick.
Austin LBJ.
Yeah, Austin LBJ. That's one of them. So there were only a handful. There were a fair number of teams that only played one close game, right, or no close games. There were some teams that frankly didn't play any. I'm trying to see if I can look that up real quick, but I'm having trouble looking that up. For example, the Woodlands. The Woodlands only played one game within one score.
Yeah.
This past year. There's a good number of those teams that did not play close games. So, but if you find yourself in close games, then generally speaking, I think if you take a look even at the home field advantage numbers, you'll say that generally speaking, you should split the difference and you should go about 500 in close games. Yep. By the way that we're describing close games, I should clear this up, is a one-score game.
Yep. Okay?
So if it is within 8 points is the most number of points you can score in one possession. So if it is a one-score game, then that is what we're calling a close game. Now, there were also teams that did nothing but live in close games. Allow me to introduce you to the Abilene Wiley Bulldogs. Okay? The Abilene Wiley Bulldogs played 8 games out of their 14. 8 games within one score.
I remember we had Coach on either Scoreboard or Football Friday last season, and we were like, Coach, do you ever just feel like, I don't know, having a little bit of a gap? And he's like, it's killing me.
8 games within one score. They beat Brownwood by 6. They lost to Lubbock Cooper by 5. They lost to Stephenville by 7. They lost to San Angelo Central on the last play on a Hail Mary by 2.
Yes, that's when it was.
They beat Wichita Falls Rider by 1. They beat Amarillo Palo Duro by 3. And then they beat Canutillo by 4, and they lost to Argyle in the playoffs by 7.
Yeah, it was the San Angelo Central game where we all started going, well, they've been doing this a lot.
That is the most number of games
That's
that a
crazy.
team played within one score in 2022. Abilene Wiley played 8 games within one score in 2022. That's pretty remarkable. But you may also notice, as I went through those, their record in those games, 4-4.
Right at about 500.
Most teams hovering around 500 as far as one-score games is concerned.
Which, if you're a coach and you want to preach that every possession matters, there's your
and certainly there's an element.
Your sample size.
I think when you talk about a close game, certainly there's an element of luck
Yes.
right? One play can literally change the course of the game. There's certainly an element of luck. There's also an element of clutch, right? I don't want to go too crazy into the idea of clutch, but for example, China Spring is a team we're about to talk about. China Spring went 4-0 in close games, right? China Spring, pretty darn good team. That's obviously a team that put it together in close games, and they thrived in those situations. So I don't think it's one thing or another. But I think that when you get into a close game, there's obviously talent involved and handling the pressure, but there is also luck, and I think we should recognize that. So I want to look at the teams that were the best in one-score games in 2022, and there were 4 teams that stood out above everybody. Okay, there are 4 teams. Hitchcock,
My darling.
your beloved Hitchcock.
Which is why it was such a hard season to watch.
It was. I certainly understand that. They went 5-0 in their one-score games. Port Neches Groves, en route to their state championship run, went 5-0 in one-score games.
I think a couple of those were also quite a few of those were in overtime for them.
Right. Wimberley is another team that went 5-0 in non-district, or rather in one-score games, which, yeah, you know what? Made it all the way to a state championship game. They were pretty remarkable. I think the outlier on that top line is George Ranch. Because, okay, Hitchcock, pretty darn good, right? I want to say regional finalists.
Yes.
Regional finalists, right?
Correct.
Good team. Port Neches Groves played for a title. Wimberley played for a title. George Ranch went 6-5.
Wow.
Okay? But in their close games, they went 5-0 in close games.
So they only won one game by a margin.
Had a 3-point win over Fort Bend Clements. They had a 3-point win over Fort Bend Travis. They had a 3-point overtime win over Fort Bend Bush, a 3-point win over Fort Bend Dulles, and a 7-point win over Fort Bend Elkins.
Goodness.
So I want you to think about this. They went 6-5 this last year. 6-5, and certainly Nick Cavallo and company doing work down there in Richmond. They were 19 points away
from
going 1-9.
Yeah.
So you want to talk about coming up when it matters most.
No kidding. That's impressive.
They went 5-0 in games decided by 8 or fewer points. Then there's a glut of teams that went 4-0. Bunch of teams. I'll just run through them quick. Anna, Burton, China Spring, Cushing, Groover, Lavernia, Muleshoe, whose coach we're going to talk to in the next segment. Hey, look, it's almost like we booked this show on purpose.
Wow.
New Braunfels Canyon went 4-0 in one-score games. North Crowley had a flair for the dramatic. They went 4-0.
With an undefeated regular season.
Palestine went 4-0. Pampa, San Diego, Sims Bowie, and then South Oak Cliff. South Oak Cliff went 4-0 in close games. In fact, what I think is interesting, you got 2 teams that played each other.
That's true.
That won a combined 9-0 in one-score games.
For the state championship. Yeah, that's crazy.
Kind of wild. You also had 2 teams that went 5-1. Corpus Christi Veterans Memorial went 5-1 in one-score games, as did Tomball. Tomball went 5-1. They had a flair for the dramatic. And then you had a decent number of teams that went 4-1 in one-score games. Cibolo Steel, Crandall, Frisco Reedy, La Feria, Lubbock Cooper, Port Arthur Memorial, and Red Oak. Those are teams that went 4-1. So these were teams that when it got to the nitty-gritty, when it got down to winning time, these teams were the best at coming up with those plays and coming up with those one-score wins. They were excellent. They were the best teams in Texas high school football in one-score games. Pickle, it is now time to unveil the most shocking statistic I found about the 2022 Texas high school football season. And it belongs to the Odom Owls.
This is crazy.
Odom has the dubious honor of going 0-7 in one-score games. 0-7. They went 1-9 this season, okay? And yet, they are literally a handful of plays away from being 8-2.
That's just jarring.
0-7. Okay, they had a 6-point loss to Mathis. They had a 7-point loss to San Diego, who, by the way, was on our other list of being really good in one-score games. They had a 7-point loss to Taft, a 1-point loss to Santa Rosa, a 1-point loss to Hebbronville, a 2-point loss to Banquetti, and an 8-point loss to George West.
That's like at max 30 points?
Yeah. Think about that. They're about 30 points away from going 8-2 instead of 1-9.
Yeah, 7-7, 6-8, and then 2-2, 1-1.
Right. So there were a handful of other teams that played in. We already talked about Abilene Wiley. There are a handful of other teams that played in 7+ one-score games.
Yes.
And almost all of them kind of hover around that
500
that 500, right? El Paso Americas went 4-3. Stephenville went 4-3. Bullard went 3-4. Like, one of the outliers is Laredo United South. They went 2-5, which kind of unlucky, right? Nothing comes close to Odom.
No.
Odom
1-9 to.
You would. They had 3 games within 2 points,
Yeah.
and they lost all of them.
Yeah.
Shocking. But they are far from alone as far as again, I don't want to say like unlucky, because there's some skill involved in this. But like, certainly you would think that if you play in 5 games of one that were decided by one score or a fewer, that you would win one of them.
Right.
And so you take a look at these teams. Perryton went 0-5 in one-score games, as did Round Rock McNeil. 2 teams went 0-5. You got a bunch of teams there at 0-4. Borger, Buna, Carrizo Springs, Cy Ranch, Frisco, Wakeland, Leander Glen, Liberty, shout out Hudson Standish, Lubbock, Monterey, New Caney Porter, Overton, Paul Pewitt, and Spearman all went 0-4 in one-score games. And then you have one team in Bastrop that went 1-5 in one-score games. And I just, like, to me, I have to wonder what the conversation is like for Armando Huerta and the Odom Owls of, like, you guys are in every game. But, like, at the same time, certainly finishing is a skill.
Right.
And it's something that you have to learn how to finish. To go, think about that between Hitchcock, who went 5-0 in one-score games, or even go with San Diego, who played Odom.
Yep.
In the same, I want to say the same district. Yeah, the same district. They were, no, it's not a district game. I'm sorry. San Diego went 4-0 in one-score games, and Odom went 0-7 in one-score games. Again, certainly there's skill involved, and certainly there's plays that come up.
Right.
But when it gets to a point of 0-7 in one-score games,
3 games within 2 points,
you're snake bit.
Yeah.
You're snake
Well,
bit.
and a lot of coaches will tell you that. I think that when it comes to having a jarring statistic like that with not being able to finish a game, is a lot of times all you need is one. Like, if you can just, after the 3rd or 4th time that happens, if you can just win one of them, I would be dumbfounded if another one happened after that.
So let me give you an example. Okay, let's go back to Odom. Okay, Odom is sitting at they're now sitting at 1 and 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1-6. Okay, they're sitting at 1-6. They've just beaten Monte Alto. They're only one of the year. And yeah, they look back and they go, boy, howdy, we've got 4 losses in one-score games. We can turn around. But we just got done throttling Monte Alto. Let's turn things around.
Yep.
We're going to Hebbronville. They lose by 1 point. Think about if that flips.
Oh, yeah.
If that flips, you wonder if they make the playoffs.
Right. Yeah.
Because then they lose by 2 to Banquetti and they lose by 8 to George West.
Yeah, because what happens in those scenarios is you look up at the scoreboard and you see that you're down by 1 and you say, Here it goes again. It's going to happen again. And then you're out of the game at that point.
And yet, at the same time, I think go to a team like Port Neches Groves. Wimberley's another good example of that. I think those two teams They got into late and close situations, and they go,
but here we go.
baby, we're comfortable.
Yep.
We live here.
Yep.
This is what we do all the time. This is how we live.
Which is such a narrative that we talk about all the time when it comes to playoffs, is when you get past about the third round, you legitimately say, hey, look, this team has played 4 close games. They're comfortable here. We talk about it on air all the time, like, oh, they've been in this situation. They're not batting their eyes going down at halftime.
You're exactly right. And I go back to that 2021 title game between Franklin and Gunner. Mm-hmm. And one of the keys going in that game that we thought was Franklin's played 2 close games.
Yep.
Remember that semifinal? They really had
Against
to
Wascom.
Yeah, they really had to work for it in that semifinal. And then their season opener, they had to work for it as well. Mm-hmm. Gunner had blown the doors off everybody.
Yeah. I mean, they were winning by like a margin of like 28, 30 points.
And certainly I think Franklin was the better team in that game. I'm not taking anything away from them.
No.
But I think it's impossible to extricate their success in close games and their experience in close games compared to Gunner, who the first time they were in a competitive fourth quarter was in a state championship game.
Well, and then I think you even go back to the Jim Ned Hallettsville game that ended up winning, or Jim Ned won in overtime, and it's like both of those teams had played a couple of close games, and so that's what made that game so incredibly fun, is that both teams are used to doing that.
So there you have it. I took a look at teams in 1-score games. Shout out.
That's just heartbreaking.
Shout out to teams like Hitchcock, Richmond George Ranch, Wimberley, and Port Neches Groves. And boy, I feel like I just need to send Armando Huerta a hug.
Yeah, and just say,
that's brutal.
buddy, you were right there.
Anyway, that's Math Tuesday.
Math Tuesday.
Thanks so much for watching that video. If you would like more and to be notified when they come out, go ahead and click that subscribe button right down there. You can also watch Texas Football Today every day live at noon on TexasFootball.com, Facebook, Twitch, and right here on YouTube. For more of the best coverage of Texas football in the Lone Star State, go to TexasFootball.com/subscribe.